we're very fortunate in the Idaho State Legislature to have a senator who actually was and hopefully I get this title right, but he was a former deputy fire chief of the Santa Monica Fire Department. So right down there. So Senator Carl Bjerke out of District 5 up here in North Idaho joins me now. Senator, good to see you. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts real quick on what you see going down in your former stomping grounds.
Well, like I told my wife this morning, and people here at the Capitol, I have a kind of an urge to be down there again. I mean, it's really tough. But I was saying it's tough to be up here watching something that used to help mitigate back in the day, so to speak. And I still have friends and retired folks that live around Pacific Palisades and the Malibu and Santa Monica area. So it's been heartbreaking to hear some of the things that have been happening.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm, originally from the area as well, spent a lot of time down there. And so it is very heartbreaking. Our heart goes out to all of our family and friends that are down there. And one of the things that really strikes us, especially from a leadership standpoint, is, wildfires do happen. They do break out. Sometimes it's arson, sometimes it's natural. But that's the entire system, right, that we've set up with our fire departments, is that you guys are trained, you go out there and you fight these fires bravely. And if you don't have the tools or resources needed, then you have something that happens like this. And it's not just the tools that you need to fight the fire, but it's also the things you do beforehand, the mitigation of the brush and the reservoirs and things like that. What was your experience during your time down there? Did you find yourself in that bureaucratic mess of not having the tools necessary? What was it? What was the sentiment?
I think there's a tremendous transition that took place over the 30 years or so that I was in the business. When I transitioned out of the medical side of things, when I was making the big career change, my first foray into firefighting was to take a kind of an entry-level job in hopes of gaining enough experience to be able to test for municipalities. And so I was on an 11,000-acre brush fire in 1985 as a brush firefighter. So, all this comes back to me, and had several other occasions during the years where we were fighting fires, especially in Malibu. There's a bunch of things I could touch on here, from the leadership vacuum, some of the stuff that I was doing later on in my career. There was so many people attritioning out, let's say at LA City Fire Department, just normal retirements for guys that have put 30 plus years into the business. We were lacking strike team leaders, and those are really critical leaders on a big brush fire. You lead, there's many different aspects of it, but for instance, you would lead 5 different engines, and it's called a strike team. And you're really controlling it at the ground level. And we were losing these folks. So my job was to train these people so we could make up for a deficit that we had at that time. And it's interesting, if you think about it, not much has changed as far as the attritioning of people that are kind of baby boomers and leaving the service. But we had something happen through COVID where a lot of my friends that were maybe going to put another 2 or 3 years into the fire service because they were faced with the challenge of taking a vaccine that they particularly weren't happy about doing, just decided to retire early. So that's one aspect. I won't, I could talk about this all day long, but it's a huge component of what goes on the ground level when you're fighting these major fires is the leadership team. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, this is unprecedented. If you go back to the early 70s, the whole state was burning, right? So, you could say, there's always this argument of climate change versus how much we've done in mitigation, and just doing that type of work ahead of the fire. There's a good argument to be made for we've changed a lot of things. The good thing that came out of those early fires in the early 70s was the incident management system, which really ended up setting up the structure for how we command these major incidents that we all use to this day, especially on these major incidents and brush fires. But the other part of that was really critical was the California mutual aid system. So that when these things happen, we have all these cities, my strike team that we put together to go to many fires up and down the state of California was a combination between Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and Culver City Fire. So, there's a lot of coordination that's involved in that. Yeah. So it's interesting. I can't be the Monday morning quarterback up here in beautiful North Idaho. I can just say that my heart goes out to the folks that are dealing with this on the mitigation and the firefighting end of it. Of course, all the folks that have suffered losses. It's tragic, and
yes,
we're praying for them.
Yeah. But the same here. I just got word this morning that they're even in our area. I don't know if you know this, but there's a bunch of firefighting folks up here that have left and gone down to California to help there. And so I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of that because some of these fires are still 0 or single digit containment, which is a bad news. So shifting to Idaho, what do we do differently up here? Because we have wildfires all the time as well. I mean, this is giant forest area. There's a lot of public lands that may not be managed, or they are managed. I mean, what can you tell us about what Idaho does in terms of mitigating these types of disasters?
Well, every state has kind of a different system, and they have different challenges. The fires you're seeing now, like in Pacific Palisades and Malibu and through the valley there, most of that fire is really kind of flashy fuels and then chaparral. It's not like the big timber stuff. And I mentioned offline that what we do up here is a lot predicated on the fact that we have a huge economy in our timber industry. So we have a lot at stake to make sure we protect that. We're really
that's product out there, right? Yeah, that's the product.
That's product. In that Malibu Pacific Palisades area, obviously it's riddled with $20 million homes, but that's what we call watershed. So our main concern is making sure that water is able to be retained and not flow out into the ocean, that it'll seep into the soil. Here, it's the timber industry. So we're a little bit different in that respect. In California, obviously we had what was basically Cal Fire. And of course, the feds get involved as well. But there's much more interaction at the local level, the municipalities, the counties, and the big cities. It's like a big group effort. Idaho Department of Lands here is kind of like the forefront. It's interesting because my son works for a fire department here, actually works for Meridian, and he's always chomping at the bit to want to be involved in going to one of these fires because he remembers his old man doing it back in the day and being gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And there's my phone again, but we do a good job. But again, we're kind of like having to share that responsibility with the feds, and the state and the federal government have completely different ways of looking at these problems sometimes. And when they own 61% of our lands, that's quite a bit. We're always trying to collaborate in a way that our interests are met, and sometimes we're maybe inching into taking a little bit more of that land back, or at least the responsibility for managing the forest.
Yeah, that would be good if we had that for sure. You mentioned something about the water, and this is something that I think a lot of people are really frustrated at hearing, that the reason why certain fire hydrants were empty or there was no water. Have you ever encountered that? Or did you ever expect that? Was that ever part of one of those escalation moments? What do we do when there's no water in our fire hydrants? That's bizarre.
Yeah, obviously that's key. I can look at Santa Monica. We had a system. 60% came from the Metropolitan Water District. The other 40 was major wells, most of them going down San Vicente. And those wells need electricity to pump that water, right? And we had zones of our city that, high pressure, medium to a lower pressure. When we went on these brush fires, it's a huge issue, right? Because the power's out. We've got less pressure in some of these areas. We do a lot of tankers, water tankers, relay pumping and things like that. It's one of those things when you have time and you're able to kind of, as a management team, figure out, water sources. Obviously you have the Pacific Ocean there, the Great Pacific Fire Break, right? If you can get helicopters up and they can do Bambi buckets and they can fill 500 gallons up, if I recall, and then drop it. But when you've got 100-mile-an-hour winds or gusts of 100 miles an hour, or just sustained winds and the kind of issues they were dealing with, sometimes there's just absolutely nothing you can do but to kind of retreat, have a plan, look at a map, and decide what you can actually do, and come back and fight it when you're able to. There's just some things you can't overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Senator, I know this isn't necessarily, what nobody wants to be dealing with this, and you certainly have a lot on your plate, and I appreciate you taking the time out to speak on this. I want to have you back and talk more about legislation, about what you're doing with our budgets and everything else. So I hope you have a somewhat comfortable weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Well, I always appreciate the opportunity. I apologize. I could probably talk about this forever, but our hearts and our prayers go out to the folks in California and the firefighters and the people that are suffering loss. And we're doing our best here at the Statehouse. It's been a busy first week, and I'm looking forward to accomplishing good things. And I appreciate being on the show, Matt. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator. All right. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Yeah. Wow. Incredible. We are very lucky to have Senator Bjerke up here for some of that insight. So we appreciate that.